The rain hit the steps of the hospital like tapping fingers, sharp and cold. A man in a perfect black suit stood still, soaked, not caring. His watch, worth more than most people's cars, kept ticking, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Behind the glass doors was his daughter, paralyzed, silent, and slipping away from him one quiet day at a time. He came here often, but never went inside. Not really. He couldn't face her eyes. Couldn't face the truth. Then a voice broke through the sound of rain. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." The man turned quickly. A boy stood just a few feet away, soaked to the bone, torn clothes. Sneakers barely held together with duct tape. He looked no older than 16, but it wasn't the clothes that froze the man. It was the boy's eyes. They weren't begging for money. They weren't hollow or hopeless. They were calm, steady, certain. "What did you just say?" The man asked, barely able to get the words out. "Your daughter," the boy said softly. "Room 312, 3rd floor. She's been in that chair 8 months. The doctors gave up, but they're wrong." A chill ran down the man's spine. His heart beat faster. How did this boy know her room? Or how long it had been? "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rising a little. The boy held out a hand, thin, calloused, and shaking just slightly from the cold. "My name's David." The man didn't take the hand. His brain was still trying to make sense of what was happening. "I know this sounds crazy," David continued, "but your daughter is lying in that bed thinking her life is over. And you're standing here because money, power, none of it can fix what happened." The man took a small step back. He didn't want to believe what he was hearing, but every word felt like a direct hit to his chest. Words no stranger should have access to. Words he hadn't even said out loud. "How do you know all this?" he asked. His voice cracked. David didn't answer right away. He looked at the hospital doors behind the man. "You love her. I can see it, but you're scared. You don't know how to look at her anymore because she reminds you of what you can't fix." The man lowered his eyes. David went on, his tone quiet but firm. "But she's not waiting for doctors. She's waiting for you. The real you. Not the man who writes checks and flies in specialists. The dad who used to read her stories. The one who believed in her dreams." The man's lips parted, but no sound came out. The rain had soaked through his coat, but he barely felt it. "I've been where she is," David said. "Not in a wheelchair. But I know what it's like when people look at you and only see what's wrong." For the first time, the man looked at David closely. The way he stood, the way he spoke. He wasn't just a street kid. There was something else here, something deeper. "Why are you really here?" he asked, more gently this time. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn journal. The leather cover was cracked. The man took a slow breath, eyes fixed on it. "This belonged to someone who knew more about spinal injuries than anyone alive," David said. "She was my grandmother. She raised me. She taught me everything. And you want to use that knowledge on my daughter?" The man asked. "No," David said simply. "I want you to see her first, really see her, and then, if you're willing, we try. Together." The man looked through the glass doors again. His daughter was up there, alone. He hadn't touched her hand in weeks, hadn't looked into her eyes without flinching. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Because today is the first day you stayed long enough in the rain to hear me," David replied. The man stared at him. For a long time. Then, slowly, his head nodded once. They walked through the hospital doors side by side, two strangers soaked in rain, connected by one shared hope. The lobby lights felt warm. For the first time in months, so did something inside the man's chest. And for the first time in 8 months, he was ready to truly see his daughter again. The lobby of the hospital was too quiet for a place meant to heal. The polished floors reflected the fluorescent lights above, and somewhere down the hall, a heart monitor beeped like a metronome stuck on a slow rhythm. But the man didn't hear it. All he could hear was the soft sound of his own footsteps. and the boys beside him. David walked without fear, even in his torn hoodie and wet shoes. He didn't fidget. He didn't seem nervous to be standing next to one of the most powerful men in the city. And he wasn't asking for anything. No money, no deal, just trust. That made the man even more uneasy. They stopped near the elevators. The man turned toward the boy. "You said things you shouldn't know about my daughter. Her room, her injury, her thoughts. How?" David didn't blink. "I've been coming here, watching, listening. People talk, nurses talk, patients talk. I piece things together. That doesn't explain how you knew about Switzerland, or the $2 million I spent last fall." David reached into his hoodie again, slowly this time, and pulled out the same leather journal. It looked older under the hospital lights, worn, loved, important. "I told you," David said. "This belonged to my grandmother. She was a doctor. Not just any doctor. She worked with children who had spinal cord trauma. Injuries that specialists like yours now call irreversible." The man didn't respond. He remembered the name scrawled in faded ink on the inside cover, Dr. E. Vasquez. A name he hadn't heard in years. A name that once brought him hope before it was taken away. "She passed when I was 11, David continued. "They said her work died with her, but it didn't. She left this with me. And I've been studying it ever since." The man raised an eyebrow. "You're not even 18. You expect me to believe you understand medical science better than trained professionals?" "No," David replied. "I don't expect you to believe anything. I expect you to look at your daughter, really look at her, and ask yourself if what you've been doing has helped." That hit harder than it should have. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened, but neither moved. She stopped speaking. "About her future," the man said suddenly. "She used to talk about becoming a veterinarian. Now she just stares at the ceiling." David nodded like he already knew. "She still dreams about animals. But no one asks anymore. Everyone talks to her like she's a chart, not a person." That hurt more than the man was ready for. Because deep down he knew it was true. Every visit felt like a routine. Check on vitals, talk to doctors, bring gifts, and leave before she could ask the hard questions. "She doesn't need a cure," David said softly. "She needs her father." The man finally stepped into the elevator. David followed. As the doors closed, the man turned to him again. "I've hired the best. Therapists, surgeons, nutritionists. Nothing's worked. Because healing isn't just science," David answered. "It's belief, it's connection. It's the voice in your head that says, 'I'm more than what happened to me.' That voice has been fading in her, and you can bring it back." The elevator moved slowly, like time itself had. Slowed. The man's thoughts were loud now, flooding in. "Why do you care?" He asked finally. "Why her? Why me?" David looked at the glowing number above the door, then back at the man. "Because I made a promise." The man waited, confused. "I promised my grandmother I'd help one person walk again," David said. "Not for the headlines, not for the proof, but because she believed that healing is bigger than medicine. And when I saw your daughter sitting alone in that room the first time I snuck past the nurses, I saw her, not the chair, not the diagnosis, her." The elevator door opened, 3rd floor. Room 312. The man stepped out first, slower than usual. David stayed behind. "I'm not coming in," David said. "Not yet. Why?" "Because today isn't about my promise. It's about yours." The man turned. David's voice was steady. "You made one the day she was born. Maybe not out loud, but you made it. To protect her, to believe in her, to never let her feel alone." The man felt his throat tighten. "Don't break it now." The boy stepped back and the elevator closed. Left alone in the hallway, the man looked down the corridor, toward the door with her name on it. He could already feel his heart pounding. But it wasn't fear this time. It was something else. Hope. He took a deep breath and walked. He walked slowly down the hallway, past rooms filled with flowers, beeping monitors, and quiet voices behind curtains. Each step felt heavier than the last. It wasn't the fear of her condition, it was the fear of her eyes. Eyes that once sparkled with endless life, now dimmed by months of silence and distance. He hadn't stopped loving his daughter. He just didn't know how to show up for someone when love alone couldn't fix what was broken. Room 312 stood at the end of the corridor, quiet and still. He paused, hand hovering over the handle dot in his mind. He could hear David's words. "You made a promise the day she was born. Don't break it now." He opened the door. She was sitting up in bed, her back supported by pillows. A thin blanket covered her legs. Her guitar sat in her lap, one hand resting loosely on its neck. She looked up, surprised. Her brows lifted. "You're early," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. "And you're wet." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah," he said, pulling a chair up beside her bed. "I got caught in the rain." She watched him carefully as he sat not across. The room like usual, but close. Close enough that their knees nearly touched. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. No words, no distractions. "I heard you playing," he finally said, "down the hall." Her eyes widened a little, then lowered. "I didn't." No anyone could hear. It was beautiful, she blinked. He'd never said that before, not since the accident. Not even before. "Will you play something else?" He asked out. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. She lifted the guitar again, her fingers gently finding their places on the strings. The melody that came out was haunting, sad but warm. A song that didn't ask for attention, only understanding Dot as he listened. Something inside him cracked. Open, a door he didn't realize had been locked. She wasn't just singing a song, she was telling her story. All of it, the pain, the loneliness, the waiting, but also the pieces of herself she hadn't let go of. Her voice was a bridge between who she was before and who she was still trying to become. When the final note faded, he was silent. She looked down. "It's not done yet," she said, almost apologetically. "It doesn't have to be," he replied. "It's real." She smiled faintly. "I used to play when I couldn't sleep, but then after the accident, I didn't want to hear myself anymore. I sounded broken." He shook his head. "You sound strong." She looked at him, studying his face. "You're different today. I know. You used to come in and just look past me." He lowered his eyes. "I know." She shifted the guitar off her lap and set it on the nightstand. "Why are you really here?" He met her eyes. "Because I've been running from your pain, from mine, from everything I couldn't fix with money or phone calls or specialists." He paused, trying to steady his voice. "And today, someone reminded me that the one thing you needed was me, not the businessman, just your dad." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Is that really why you came in this time?" He nodded. "I want to know you again. I want to sit here and listen, not to your doctors, to you." She reached for a glass of water on her bedside table. Her hand shook slightly, and instinctively he reached out to steady it. Their hands touched. She froze. So did he. She didn't pull away. "I want you to know something," he said. "Even if nothing changes, even if the chair stays, even if you never walk again, I'm proud of you." She looked at him like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. "You're not broken," he said again, firmer now. "You're just becoming." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought maybe you'd stopped seeing me." "I did," he whispered. "But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." She leaned back, wiping her eyes. Then she smiled through the tears. "You really did get soaked out there." He laughed, wiping water from his sleeves. "Worth it." They sat in silence for a few moments, not uncomfortable, just full. Then she turned to him. "There's a boy who visits the hospital. He's been talking to some of the patients. He's really kind. Listens more than most adults. His name's David, the man said. I met him downstairs. Her eyebrows rose. He helped me one day when I had a panic attack during therapy. Just sat with me, didn't say much, just ... stayed. That sounds like him. She hesitated. He said something once. That healing doesn't always start with the body. It starts with someone believing you still matter. He nodded. That's exactly what he told me. Outside the window, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. Inside the room, a father and daughter had begun something they both thought was lost connection. Neither of them said it out loud, but something had shifted. A promise had been made, not in words, in silence, and both of them intended to keep it. The rain had finally stopped. The drops still clung to the hospital windows, blurring the view outside, but the sky had lightened just a little, as if it, too, was trying to start over. He sat quietly beside her bed, watching her fingers trace lazy patterns on the wood of her guitar. She wasn't playing now, just holding it like something familiar, something safe. They had talked for a while, not about treatments or doctors, just small things. About the cat she used to feed behind the school cafeteria, the time she got in trouble for painting a mural on her bedroom wall, the songs she used to write and never show anyone. He listened to every word like it mattered more than any business deal he had ever made. Do you remember that time I fell in the pond trying to save a duck? She asked with a slight grin. I do, he said. You were 7, soaked to the bone, covered in algae, and still mad that I pulled you out before you could grab the duck. She laughed quietly, then shook her head. You bought me hot chocolate after, even though Mom said I didn't deserve it. You look like you needed it more than anyone, he said. There was a pause. A soft quietness between them that wasn't awkward but full of things unsaid, full of memories returning like waves. She glanced down at her legs under the blanket. They say I might not walk again. That the damage is too much. I know what they say, he replied, gently. But I also know what you just told me about dreams and songs and helping animals. I saw more life in you today than I've seen in months. She looked up at him, a little startled. I was scared, he admitted. Not of your injury. I was scared I had already lost you. That even if your body healed, we'd never find our way back to each other. Her eyes softened, the sharp edges fading. I thought that too. I wish I had listened earlier, really listened. You're listening now, she said. That matters. They sat in silence again, and then he asked the question he'd been holding in his chest. Can I hear another song? She hesitated. I don't think it's ready. Neither am I, he said with a smile. Let's be unready together. That made her chuckle, and after a moment, she lifted the guitar again. Her fingers moved gently, carefully. The melody was softer than the last one, slower, but something in it wrapped around the room like warm light. The lyrics were about fear not the loud, shouting kind, but the quiet kind that hides behind strong faces. It was about how being seen could hurt, but being invisible could be worse. She sang about her room, about lying awake at night, wondering if she was still enough, if her worth was tied to what she could do, if the people she loved could still see her, really see her, past the chair, past the silence, past the change. He felt the tears come before he could stop them. But he didn't look away this time. He didn't wipe them quickly or pretend they weren't there. He just listened. And when the song ended, she looked up and found his face wet not from rain now, but from everything he'd held in too long. Dad, she whispered. I'm here, he said. The words were simple, but for her they were everything. A knock came at the door. He turned, expecting a nurse. Instead, it was David. He stood in the doorway, dry now, wearing a clean sweatshirt and holding a cup of coffee in each hand. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said softly. She smiled. You're back. I told you I would be. She reached for her wheelchair without hesitation. He moved to help, but she waved him off gently. I can manage, she said. He nodded and stepped aside as she transferred herself with slow but practiced movements. Then she wheeled herself over to David and took one of the coffees. You didn't spike this with vitamins again, did you? She teased. Maybe, he said with a grin. Can't let you off easy. Her father watched the exchange, eyes narrowing slightly. You two know each other well, David shrugged. We talk. Sometimes she listens to me. Most of the time, she argues. She laughed. Only when you get bossy. Her father looked at her, then at David. Why didn't you tell me you knew her already? David looked serious now. Because this wasn't about me. It was about you two. She didn't need a miracle. She needed you. Her father nodded slowly, understanding now what he hadn't before. David turned to her. You told me once that? Music was the only place you didn't feel broken. She nodded. Double quotes play. Not because you're proving something, but because you're whole. She looked at both of them. Her eyes didn't hide anymore. And as she began to strum again, the man realized something. Her strength hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been waiting to be seen. The song ended, but the silence it left behind didn't feel empty. It felt powerful. She rested the guitar on her lap, breathing a little harder than before. Not from exhaustion, just from release. Playing had always been her way of speaking, when words didn't work. And now, for the first time in months, she'd played in front of someone who mattered. Two someones. Her father leaned back in the chair beside her bed, wiping his face quietly with the edge of his sleeve. He wasn't trying to hide the tears anymore, and that alone felt like healing. David, still standing near the door, looked down at the coffee cup in his hand, then stepped forward. She's stronger than you realize, he said, gently placing the cup on the side table. She's always been. The father nodded slowly. I'm starting to understand that. She smiled softly. He's been telling me that for weeks. I didn't believe him at first either. Her father looked at her, surprised. You mean all this time? She nodded. He's been coming by, talking to me. Not about nerves or surgeries or scans, about music, about life, about how I'm still me. David shrugged like it was nothing. I just showed up. She did the rest. The man leaned forward, folding his hands. You said earlier your grandmother was a doctor. David reached into his backpack, pulling out the same worn leather journal he'd shown him downstairs. He held it gently, like it was sacred. She was more than that, he said. She was a pioneer. But no one listened because her methods weren't traditional. She believed in something they didn't have space for. He handed the journal to the girl. Her eyes lit up as she flipped through the pages. This is incredible, these diagrams. I've only seen references to this kind of neural mapping in theory. Nobody's ever implemented it? Because no one's ever had both pieces, David said. The science and the support. The father leaned in. Is it real? Everything in here? David nodded. It's real, but it's not a miracle cure. It's a system, a philosophy. It mixes intensive physical therapy with very specific nutrition plans, mental health work, emotional reconnection, and belief. It works, but only if the patient has someone fighting with them, not just doctors, family. She looked up, quiet now. Her voice was low but firm. So why show this to me now? David hesitated, then spoke clearly. Because I think you're ready, and because I think your father is too. Her father didn't speak right away. He looked at her, really looked. Not at the chair, not at her injury, but at her, her fire, her questions, her strength. And then she asked something that hit deeper than anything else had. Are you doing this because you need me to be fixed? Her voice didn't shake. It didn't accuse, it just asked. Because if this is about you not being able to accept me in a wheelchair, then I don't want it. I don't want a treatment built on shame. The room froze. Her father sat up, breath caught in his chest. He looked at her, stunned by her clarity. "No," he said, quietly. "This isn't about that. I won't lie, I used to feel like I lost you the day of the accident. But today, after sitting with you, after hearing you play, hearing your dreams, I realized I haven't lost you. I've just been too afraid to see you." He moved his chair closer than ever before. "If you never take a single step again, I will still love you with everything I have," he continued. "But if there's a way for you to have more if you want it, then I'll be here, not with checkbooks, not with pressure, just with belief." Her chin trembled. She blinked away tears. "I do want it," she whispered. "Not because I want to be who I was, but because I want to be who I could be. I want options. I want control again." David smiled. "That's all I needed to hear." He pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It looked like a handwritten schedule, complete with scribbled notes, boxes, and underlined sections. "This is what the first 2 weeks would look like," he said. "It's not easy. You'll be sore. You'll cry. You'll hate parts of it, but I'll be there. And so will he." She unfolded the sheet slowly, reading it with quiet focus. Then she looked up. "Then let's start." Her father looked at her, pride swelling in his chest. Not for the choice she made, but for the courage behind it. She didn't choose treatment out of fear. She chose it out of strength, and that, he realized, was the moment everything truly changed. Not when the accident happened, not when the doctors gave up doubt, but now, right here, right now, the miracle wasn't walking again. The miracle was choosing to try. The first morning of treatment came with no fanfare. No flashing lights, no dramatic music. Just quiet determination and the soft creak of wheels turning down a therapy hall. She showed up at the hospital's private rehab wing with her father by her side. No bodyguards. No lawyers. Just a man holding his daughter's water bottle, his tie loosened, his phone turned off for the first time in years. David was already waiting inside. He wore clean scrubs, now part of a program the hospital agreed to let him assist in unofficially. His presence made some staff uncomfortable, but the results were too real to ignore. "Morning," he said as she wheeled in. "Sleep okay?" She gave a tired nod. "Let's do this before I change my mind." Her father smiled. "That's the spirit." What followed wasn't pretty. The exercises were brutal. Her legs, unused to bearing weight, trembled violently at even the idea of standing. Every muscle screamed. Her arms, her back, even her jaw ached from clenching through the pain. On day 2, she threw up from sheer exhaustion. By day 4, she refused to speak during the sessions, but she came back every single day. Not because she thought she would walk overnight, but because she had something bigger now. She had people who saw her, and that made the fight worth it. The routine was complex. In the morning, she worked with a team using David's late grandmother's protocols. Resistance bands, water therapy, and something called neuromuscular redirection, which basically tricked the brain into thinking her legs were still talking to it. Afternoons were for mental work-guided meditation, trauma counseling, songwriting sessions with other patients. And her nights? That was when her father sat beside her with a notebook, taking real notes, not about stock markets or mergers, but about her. He was learning her again, and in the process, healing himself. One night, about 3 weeks in, she turned to him and asked, "Did you really mean it? That you'd still be proud of me even if I never walk again?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, I meant every word." "Then why are you here?" "For every session?" she asked. "Even the ones where I scream at everyone and cry like a baby?" He smiled. "Because you're doing something braver than I've ever done. You're showing up, even when it hurts." She was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I didn't want you to see me weak." He leaned forward and gently touched her shoulder. "I've never seen you stronger." By the second month, something changed. It was small, simple. She stood. Just for 5 seconds. Her legs shook. Her arms clutched the support rails. Her therapist hovered behind her in case she slipped, but she stood, and in that moment, The air in the room changed. Her father, sitting in the corner with a coffee cup he hadn't touched, stood too. Not to cheer. Not to clap, he just stood with her. As if his body remembered what it was like to be proud without needing to say anything. Later that day, she wheeled into the hospital garden, where David sat reading on a bench. "Guess what?" she said, not hiding the smile on her face. He didn't even look up. 5 seconds. Her jaw dropped. "You knew?" "I've been waiting," he said, finally looking up. "Knew it would be today. You've been leaning a little better into your left side. It was time." She laughed. "You're impossible." "And you're incredible," he replied. "So we're even?" She sat beside him, not in a therapy room, not in a waiting area, but in the open, under sunlight. "I'm scared," she admitted after a long pause. "Of what?" "That I'll get too used to standing. And then when I fall again, it'll break me." David didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You will fall, maybe often, but strength isn't never falling. It's refusing to stay down." She looked at him, his worn sneakers barely holding together even now. His backpack beside him, full of notes, snacks, and a dream bigger than any title. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "Because someone once saw something in me when I didn't see it in myself. My grandmother. Now I pass that forward. That's how belief survives." That night, she went to bed sore, tired, and quietly smiling. She hadn't walked fully, but she had stood. And more importantly, she had stood for herself. And somewhere deep inside, she realized something she hadn't dared believe since the accident. She wasn't waiting to get back to who she used to be. She was becoming someone stronger than she'd ever been before. And that person was already standing tall. 6 months later, the same hospital hallway that once felt like a place of fear had become something else entirely. It had become hers. She wheeled confidently past the front desk, past the same chair she used to sit in with her head down, and into the small auditorium on the second floor. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, a small microphone clipped to her collar. She wore a blue blazer over jeans, not a patient's gown, not a hospital hoodie. Just herself. Students, doctors, therapists, and volunteers filled the room. They were here for a guest lecture series on patient-centered care. But they weren't expecting what they were about to witness. Her father sat in the front row. No suit jacket, no gold watch. Just a simple shirt and notebook in hand. And beside him sat David, no longer in worn shoes or borrowed clothes. He had a hospital volunteer badge clipped to his chest and a quiet confidence in his eyes. She rolled up to the podium, took a breath, and looked out across the room. 6 months ago, she began, I couldn't sit here and tell you this story without crying. I couldn't even imagine telling it because I thought the best parts of my life were already over. The audience leaned in. But I was wrong, not because I got better overnight. Not because of some magical cure. And not even because I can stand for 20 minutes now without assistance. A few surprised murmurs spread across the crowd. She smiled. Yes, I can stand. And yes, I've taken steps. But the real miracle? That's not what happened to my legs. It's what happened to my life. She paused. See, after my accident, I felt invisible. Everyone talked about me. No one talked to me. I became a diagnosis. A chart, a symbol of bad luck, but not a person. Not someone with ideas, with dreams, with a voice. She turned slightly toward her father, and he gave a quiet nod, holding her words carefully in his chest. But then 2 things changed, she said, her voice steady. First, my father started listening. Not as someone trying to fix me, but as someone who just wanted to know me again. He stopped looking at my wheelchair first and started seeing me. Her father blinked fast, his eyes glossy. The second thing that changed, she continued, was meeting someone who never saw me as broken to begin with. She gestured to David, who gave a small wave and quickly looked down, suddenly shy under the attention. David challenged me, encouraged me, believed in me. He didn't promise miracles, he showed me the tools to find my own. And when I fell, which happened a lot, he reminded me that falling wasn't failure. Staying down was. She paused and rolled back a bit from the podium. I'm standing here today, well, sitting. But you know what I mean, because I realized something powerful. Healing isn't about going back to who you used to be. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. The room was completely silent. She reached into a small bag at her side and pulled out a folded paper, one of the therapy journals she'd started during her treatment. It was filled with music lyrics, animal sketches, and half-written ideas for a new nonprofit she wanted to launch. Something that combined therapy animals and music for young people with mobility challenges. She held it up. This is what healing looks like, not perfect, not polished, but real and alive. As the room rose to a standing ovation, her father stayed seated for a moment longer, watching her with something deeper than pride reverence. Because this wasn't his little girl waiting for rescue. This was a woman who had rescued herself. Outside the auditorium, as the crowd began to leave, her father and David waited by the exit. When she rolled out, they both smiled. You crushed it, David said. You didn't cry? She teased her dad. I cried before you even opened your mouth, he replied, chuckling. She reached for both their hands and squeezed. You were right, she said to David. The wheelchair wasn't the problem. And it never was, he replied. Later that afternoon, she walked slowly, steadily across the garden path behind the hospital, not to prove anything. Not to post a video, just because the sun was warm and her legs felt strong enough to carry her through it. David walked beside her, hands in his pockets. Her father followed behind, not hovering, just there. And as she reached the fountain at the center, she stopped and looked at them both. You know what the real miracle is? She asked. David raised an eyebrow. You tell us? She smiled. That I finally stopped trying to be who I was before and started loving who I am now. The wind rustled through the trees. The water trickled behind them, and the moment settled over them like sunlight on new skin, soft, warm, and completely real. She wasn't a symbol of survival anymore. She was proof that some promises don't need to be spoken out loud. They're kept in the way you show up. And when someone believes in you fully, completely, it's not about walking again. It's about standing tall in your own story. That was the miracle. And it changed everything, forever.